Hello, everyone. Welcome to a Valentine's Day edition of these articles that we're so used to right now. This presentation is regarding Kittelong et al.'s topic of multimodality, presented by Diego Alvarado Ruiz and MacKenzie Stewart. The first thing we'll go over are the key terms and phrases that will play a big effect in this article. The biggest one being, of course, multimodality. Now, this is one that's pretty simple to understand, even if the word might be a bit too long or confusing. Multimodality is simply having or using a variety of modes or methods to do something. So essentially, it's a combination of different ways to have something done. For example, you can combine oral, you can combine written, you can combine visual modes in order to create a lesson, a presentation, whatever it may be. That's essentially what multimodality means. And following that, we have multimodal composition. So this is the act of creating content that communicates to an audience using any range of methods or technologies. One of the big key things argued in this article is this concept of personal agency. So agency is the notion of taking accountability or considering one's own influence and actions on a situation. So essentially this sense of how much of a factor am I being in what I'm discussing, or this sense of accountability and responsibility and sense of putting your own self in whatever it is that you're discussing. Of course, case study, something we're all very familiar with, a research method in which real-world situations are analyzed to study a concept or an idea. So basically a real-world example. One very specific to this article is the Sketch and Tell game. This is a learning game developed by the National Science Foundation. This is one of the case studies talked about in this article. And so this interactive game allowed middle schoolers to draw visions of future technologies, of what they would think that we would need in the future, how their lives would be. And then this program would allow them to scan those drawings and create an animation complete with voiceover work and video effects. So it was a very hands-on way of having kids create these ideas and visions. Let's go ahead and summarize the article now and talk about the main key points that we got to take away from this. So essentially, this article, it uses case studies to try to prove a point that Kittelong et al. Is trying to argue. This point being that they believe that multimodal composition allows for a higher level of compositional fluidity and encourages the exercise of personal agency when it's accompanied with things like revision and self-reflection. So with this, the article starts with a bit of a background of what multimodality is. And as we mentioned earlier, multimodal composition can really be defined as using more than one mode or method of composition, such as oral, visual, textual, etc., whatever it may be. You combine all these different modes to create a brand new way of communication or a brand new work. And so with this, the authors do present two principal aspects regarding multimodality. One of these aspects is not touched upon at all in this article. The second aspect is what the article is essentially all about. The first of the principles is regarding that multimodality has to account for the culturally and linguistically diverse and increased globalized society. So it's a very, very good point, but as mentioned, we won't talk about this in this article. The second point is the big one. The second point talks about this challenge being that literacy pedagogy must now account for the burgeoning variety of text forms associated with information and multimedia technologies. So essentially, this whole technological evolution and this shift in mentality that is sort of infecting, for lack of a better word, the educational system that we have. And in order to illustrate their points, this article focuses on three key studies and three different projects to kind of illustrate the way that multimodality affects the minds of children primarily. So let's go ahead and talk about the first case study that we have, this being the Water's Journey Through the Everglades evaluation. So the Water's Journey Through the Everglades is a planned exhibit that is designed to help educate people on the role of water in the environment. So as part of this exhibit, as part of the funding for the exhibit, actually, one of the key things was that the researchers had to essentially evaluate a couple of sixth graders so they could sort of understand what the mentality was with sixth graders regarding their understanding when it comes to things like water conservation and the importance of water both locally and globally. So the researchers asked 20 sixth graders to visually depict the importance that water has in their lives. So the children were given complete free rein to draw anything that they felt symbolized or represented their understanding of this prompt. And so these drawings, as you can see here on the screen, show the way that students understand their role that they play in the world, both again locally and globally, when it comes to saving water. One of the key takeaways that Kid Along devises from this case study is that the children displayed a lack of agency in their drawings, even though the drawings did show a basic understanding of what they were being asked to draw. So the children, they clearly understood the basic foundations of water conservation and the impact that water plays. However, in a lot of the drawings, the children lacked this sense of I'm a factor as well. They didn't have this sense of accountability or responsibility. And so essentially Kittinger's using this case study to kind of show the level of depth of knowledge that children have when multimodal strategies may not be employed properly. This quote right here is super important and essentially summarizes this. And so Kid Along is saying that the evaluation results established that the children in the target group had likely amassed enough basic knowledge to comprehend the water-related challenges in their surroundings and could benefit from learning through informal contexts, such as video games and interactive museum exhibits that reinforce this. That end right there, learning through informal contexts, will be the big key and takeaway from this case study. As case study 2 that follows here in a little bit ties directly into what Kid Along is trying to argue about how using these multimodal methods will actually improve children's ability to learn and better understand their role in the world and the knowledge base that they have. So let's go ahead and talk about the second case study here. So case study 2 is focused on an initiative by the National Science Foundation. This initiative is called the Come Back to the Fair game. So this is a game-like environment that sought to replicate the 1964-1965 New York World's Fair. And so with this, there was various activities that children could take part in that really got them thinking about the future and about their role in their lives, future technologies, that sort of stuff. And so the biggest highlight was an activity called Sketch and Tell, which you see a couple pictures there on your screen regarding this activity. So with Sketch and Tell, the students, the sixth graders, they were able to create drawings and then not just end it at drawing, but they would then take their drawings, scan their drawings into the computer program, and they were able to record lines, audio lines, as well as animate their drawings and essentially create a final product that talked about their ideas and their visions for the future. And so with this case study, this is just such a clear example of what multimodality is. So the students are using a bunch of different techniques. They're using audio, they're using visual, they're drawing, they're writing things, they're designing, and this really gets them thinking about things and really gets them to become an agent in their own world. And regarding that topic of agency again, there's this really good quote by Kid Along et al. On page 46, where he states that participants exhibited personal agency from the very beginning and that they required little assistance to launch and operate the software. They were eager to work with the software and were enthusiastic about giving feedback. So Kid Along really likes this because it shows that using these methods can be extremely effective when trying to educate children, for example. Let's say that rather than doing this activity, they were just told to simply write about their impact or their future visions. It would be far less effective, and students would probably be less motivated than they showed with this hands-on activity. So this allows them to engage in learning material in such a brand new way by incorporating all of these different methods together. And again, as Kid Along states, captioning and digitizing their own hand-drawn images and narrating their scripts really really afforded the participants time to synthesize and reflect upon their assumptions and knowledge. So this goes back to what Kidalong was trying to argue, in how using multimodal methods of learning can enhance that said learning and can really empower the kids so that they can go ahead and essentially learn in a deeper level by all these different modes and methods. Like we saw with the students here, who were just so excited and so wondrous about what they could possibly invent and what they could possibly make. So this overall is a very good case study to illustrate the effectiveness of using multimodal methods. Let's go ahead and talk about the third and final case study. And so this case study focuses on a class assignment from a sophomore level college composition course. And this assignment at its surface was very, very simple. The assignment was simply that students had to go out and research a project and talk about the inception of the project, how it's made, and any sort of ethical issues that were brought along by said project or industry. So the students were given absolute freedom in how they chose to present their topics, and the students were encouraged to sort of think outside the box for this. So the students weren't going to just do a research paper. They weren't just going to present a presentation. They were supposed to create this big thing, this creative work that illustrated their understanding of the summary. There was also a research paper involved, but that's something the students did in addition to whatever model or whatever exhibit they wanted to use to illustrate their point. And so the students got really, really creative with these projects, and they went and researched things through text. They went and did video research, personal anecdotes as well. And so once it came time for the presentation of the students' findings, the students really demonstrated a heightened sense of agency and understanding, and of course not to mention the sense of creativity that the students have. Some students, they painted things on wooden doors, such as a student who did a presentation over the diamond industry, painted on a wooden door. Another student made a giant video game box to talk about the sexualization of women in video games, for example. And so it was really interesting how students were able to be engaged in a brand new way that they hadn't been used to before. And so this engagement and this multimodal way of thinking really got some fruits going, the fruits of their labor, so to speak. The professors were absolutely happy with the results of this project, and the students were happy as well. Some of the students commented about how doing the project in this way really got them to think about things on a deeper level and got them to really think about their project in a way that simply doing a research method wouldn't have accomplished. So another good case study to use when arguing for the benefits of multimodal teaching. When it comes to a critical analysis of this article, overall, this article does a really good, thorough job in using these case studies to illustrate the point that Kidalong was attempting to make regarding the effectiveness and the benefits of using multimodality. Each of these case studies did illustrate different aspects of the experiences that contributed to a higher sense of learning. So the sketch and tell, even the first case study that showed that students lacked a general understanding of their work, and even the third case study where students showed that incorporating multimodality increased not only the level of passion for the work, but the results of the work as well. There's a really good quote by Kidalong that states that these multimodal composing opportunities demonstrate the possibilities for composers to begin to see their work as more other than writing. So just simply writing a paper or using one form of modality, it doesn't provide the same sense of accomplishment. It doesn't provide this greater sense of being. Multimodality does allow those students to really invest in themselves and in their work. And so employing multimodality when teaching does allow for a higher quality work to be shown by students and allows those students to think in a broader sense. One critique I would definitely have of this article are that obviously this article focused a lot on the benefits of multimodality, but I definitely feel that other things could have been touched upon, such as the benefits of using a single modality, or for example, talk about some of the drawbacks of using multimodality. But overall, it does a very good job in getting across why using multimodality can be so important in our classrooms and so important for us to be able to truly unlock the potential that we have in our students and in ourselves.
All right, hello everyone. We're going to move into the article structure. So we're going to start with the definition of multimodality so we can kind of get a grasp on what we're talking about. Multimodality can be described as the application of various contexts, whether that be written, oral, visual, to encourage thoughtful meaning making. So the authors argue that we should use multimodality in the classroom as a pedagogical tool to kind of promote compositional fluidity and encouraging personal agency. And if you'll refer to the handout, you can see how agency is described. It's basically how we situate ourselves in the context of understanding. So the author's going to describe that there has been a multimodal turn, and that's basically the advancement of multimodality in the classroom and how we should use more than one mode to communicate, entertain, solve problems, and engage in deliberation. The authors discuss the different contexts that support multimodal composition, and they break it into two contexts, which we're going to discuss. It's the non-academic and the academic. The authors use a case study approach for this specific study, and they're looking to answer two questions. It's what, when, where, how, and why might students compose when they aren't locked into the role of students, as well as how can teachers and other facilitators encourage writers to be more alert to opportunities to exercise personal agency through their composing. So the three case studies here kind of go into really in-depth detail in the actual article about how the different methods are being used to promote multimodality, but I'm just going to give a very brief overview of each of the case studies. You can find more about it in the summary section above. So looking at the first scenario, this is water's journey through the Everglades. This scenario was designed to focus on a user-centered study, and these were done through interactive museum exhibits. The participants were asked to describe their prior knowledge on the subject and the science of water, and then to visually depict that knowledge in a drawing. So the authors found that in this study, students constructed themselves as learners and demonstrated what they learned through the content, but they didn't expound on it, and they experienced personal agency, but not in a way that supported action or opportunity to expand beyond just the basic knowledge. There was no critical thinking beyond that. So the second scenario, this is the sketch and tell scenario, and you'll hear me refer to this one a little bit more in the what stood out section because I felt like this was a really, really interesting case. But basically, this one was designed to utilize a game-like style. So these games were designed to engage students in the learning and stimulate their imagination to kind of come up with their own form of composition. Students were asked to envision future technology, draw it, write out text, and then they scan this text into a software, which is Sketch and Tell, where they were asked to record an audio clip. These audio clips were based on their written descriptions, so a couple of the questions that were included in this study were, what fuel should my vehicle of the future use? Or what does a kitchen need in order to function in deep space? These really thought-provoking questions, which actually did what they were intended to do. The combination of the context, it created the multimodal composition that synthesized visual, written, oral content all for one central idea. The authors did describe the students as alert agents because the students were asked to fill out exit surveys, and the students were engaged in the activity and suggested additional project ideas. So the students didn't just constrict themselves to completing the task, but they also coordinated and synthesized it a bit more. So the final context, this is scenario 3, the multimodal composition at the college level. This may be a study that's a little bit more applicable to what we are studying since this is teaching college composition. But essentially, the scenario 3 assessed college level composition, and basically the students were asked to choose a message and a medium while synthesizing research findings across modalities. So the students created timeline maps that were designed to depict a production cycle of a product of their choice from beginning to end. And by analyzing and critiquing visual, textual, oral, and multimodal communication, students were instructed to use these contexts and create a multimodal composition of their own. So these timeline maps were designed for students to critically think and identify ethical dilemmas based on things in their chosen fields. So the project consisted of peer reviews, reflections, and other forms of discourse. So in this case, the authors referenced personal agency to describe a student's reflective essay with a strong call to action, and it promoted the readers themselves to critically analyze the topic that was being discussed. So after the case study structure of the article, the authors examine each scenario that utilize different forms of multimodal methods as a learning tool. The structure allows the authors to explore the different types of multimodal context and how it impacted the students' agents. The authors also offer suggestions to instructors on how they can work with students in developing their own personal agency and how they can encourage that critical thinking in the classroom. The authors emphasize the importance of free thinking and creativity as it shifts the amount of control from the instructor to the student, and that forces students to kind of explore their own multimodal composition context. And the authors conclude the article by reinforcing the idea of how these multimodal conditions and designs in a composition class can be harnessed to encourage students to develop their own alert personal agency. So there were a couple of things from this article that stood out to me. I do want to reference back to scenario 2, the sketch and tell. And the authors state that the middle school students needed very little assistance in launching and operating the software and how eager they were working with it. So this made me think back to early elementary school for me. That was the early 2000s. Technology wasn't a huge thing, but we did have a computer lab with the kind of boxier computers. And some students were extremely gifted when it came to using technology to draw pictures or whatever the assignment was, but some students weren't comfortable with the software and they were just better with, pen to paper, marker to paper, that sort of thing. So it kind of brought up the idea, having multimodal mediums in the classroom can kind of help students determine what works for them and what doesn't. Going back to technology, the development of technology has, really transformed multimodal mediums, because now instead of just having paper, there's technology where you can type, you can audio record like I'm doing now, you can video record. So the development of technology really just kind of boosted that. And that's what the authors are saying, at the beginning, the multimodal term. But multimodality, and communication skills are something that also kind of stood out to me, because some people are really, really great with writing and getting their idea across, which I feel like is my strong suit, whereas some people are really good at doing this and talking and getting their point across better. So I think having multimodal tools in the classroom can kind of help students with communication skills and figuring out, okay, this doesn't work, this does work, I need to change this, I need to change this. And it also helps instructors kind of see, okay, this is where these students are. If I want the same outcome of this project, I should allow different methods of doing it and what works best for the students. So just a few final thoughts on the article. Basically, the main takeaway is the emphasis on multimodal context and how they promote active learning and encourage student independence and critical thinking. By student independence, I mean when you incorporate multimodal ways of doing things in the classroom, students have a little bit more control rather than being, forced to stay within a certain set of guidelines. So that gives them more creativity and in turn really kind of pushes critical thinking. And I keep emphasizing critical thinking because we're always saying how, what we teach in a class shouldn't just be something to help them pass an assignment or make an A in the class. It should essentially be something that they take beyond the classroom, out into the workforce, out into the real world. And critical thinking is something that is so incredibly important in the real world. But multimodal contexts also create a diverse learning environment so that students can really figure out what best works for them, whether, they're better at visual representation, written representation, It all just kind of depends on the student, and having that diverse learning environment really promotes just overall a proactive classroom environment.
And of course, we will wrap up here with the discussion questions that we have for our articles this week. With that, here's both of the questions on the screen right now. So hopefully everyone learned a thing or two about multimodality. And with that, hopefully everyone has a good Valentine's Day and everyone has a good rest of the weekend. And overall, hopefully y'all's semester is going well as well. You know, we're almost getting to the halfway point, and so it's definitely been an interesting one. Let's keep going, and I hope everyone's doing really, really well.